Go away, helicopter, please. Have they no decency nowadays? Hello there. And I know, the first question that must come to your mind is, Walter, what is the subject that you're gonna tell us about today? I'm glad you asked. To me, in most cases, solo tabletop role-playing can be the ultimate form of creative freedom in tabletop role-playing setting. You are the master, you are the player, you are all of the characters, you are the world, and you are also the rules of the world. While on paper, to explore this endless realm of possibilities and have these adventures where anything can happen sounds like really awesome. It makes me feel like I already want to pick up the dice and start playing. But on the other side of the coin is the prominent feeling of being lost in all of that freedom and options, like where to go next, basically. I think most of the soloists will ask themselves these next questions at some point in their gaming career, in their hobbying career, in their solo playing journey. One of those questions is, should I roll for this? Another question that comes to my mind frequently is being asked while playing solo is, what now? What next? And maybe the third one is, how did I get here? How can I solve this mess? So yeah, with the infinite freedom of solo tabletop role-playing, it can be quite a lot. So don't you dare to follow me. Stay. So the pure amount of freedom and choice can also be paralyzing in some sense. And let's be real, making an engaging adventure, it's really difficult, even for the professionals sometimes. So yeah. So let me present to you three guidelines that I use personally in my games and my tabletop gaming overall, not just solo games, but also in group play. Guideline number 1 is the most frequent one, and that is simply, when should I roll the dice? That's the thing, we roll dice. That's the whole point of playing role-playing games, right? In solo role-playing, I feel like we most of the time tend to roll the dice too often rather than too rarely. I feel like I'm not rolling the dice enough, so how could I roll more? Yeah, because usually when we are thinking about should we roll the dice, we only think about the situation, but we might not think about the consequences or the possible outcomes of the roll. What happens when we roll the dice and we get the results? So here is my philosophical core of rolling the dice. Rolling the dice equals lack of context. When you should roll the die is only when you don't have enough information to make the decision of the action. Like, could the action possibly be done? And not only that, we should only roll when we know that something interesting comes out of the rolling. Whether we succeed or do not succeed, or it's something else, we should be certain that something changes to some direction that is interesting for the game in order for us to roll. So here is kind of like a really easy basic flowchart that you can follow when you are determining should I roll the dice while playing solo. Step number 1 is, do I have enough information and context to make the decision without rolling? If the answer is yes, do not roll. If the answer is no, go to the next step. Step number 2 is, will all of the outcomes of the roll create something interesting for the story? If you are a character who is looking for a location in a city and you are thinking about, I don't know if my character would just find this place, should I roll for it? If you are playing, for example, like a binary system with a success and fail, we all know what the success means. The player or the character finds the location. That's fine. If the failure means that the character simply just do not find the location? Is that interesting for your story? What that means for the character? If the answer is that it just slows the adventure down, do not roll. The character just finds the location. If the failure means that the character finds the location, but it took longer than expected for the character to get into that location, so now there is a third interested party already in that location, and there is basically like a new obstacle for the character, an additional obstacle that the character has to now overcome because they were too slow. Now that's an interesting stake. But rather than just always trying to make the roles interesting, it's fine if you don't like come up with anything cool at the moment. If you don't come up with anything, just don't roll. Take the interesting outcome right off the bat. But if there is something interesting already, like if you knew about this third party and it was the options come very naturally, then do the roll. Are we recording? Yes, we are. We are still recording. That's nice. ASMR. Yeah, this is gonna be the best experience you ever have. Bitch. So yeah, step 1. Do I have enough context to make the decision without rolling? Usually if you have the context, just make the decision, do not roll. Step 2. Will all of the outcomes create something interesting for the narrative? If the answer is no, only one option will create something interesting, do not roll and just accept that outcome. And now number 3. After making the roll, will there be some forces opposing the outcome of the roll that can undermine the roll? Meaning that you get a roll and succeed, and the opposition rolls and succeeds, and now it counteracts the first roll. And again, nothing happens. This is basically like from improvisational courses, the blocking. So another roll blocks another roll. In this case, decide which side you want to roll for. Do not roll the both, because there is no reason to make 2 rolls and the end result of those rolls is that nothing happens. That makes absolutely no sense, and you should just decide one side and roll. Or if you feel like that the roll is made but there is some opposing force that can possibly counteract it, maybe it just happens and the thing is counteracted and now something else needs to be done. In all the situations where you can save time by not rolling empty rolls, that will amp up your gaming experience so much, and that will also increase the flow of the game. And I feel you, I love rolling as well. I love rolling the dice. I love this feeling that I don't know what happens next. But I promise you, you will have chances to roll. So do not roll in vain, because the less you roll, the more meaningful and impactful your rolls will feel. And when you exactly know the stakes and you know something interesting will happen, it feels good. It will definitely make any game better. Guideline number 2 is maybe the most difficult one, because it is something that we are dealing with our everyday lives. Oh, that went deep. But that's true. This is 100% true. This will make you a better person. Subscribe for lifestyle tips. I 100% believe that if you can also incorporate this second guideline into your life, it will make your life better. And that is not blocking situations. So we all know the improvisational rule, yes and, right? Like, yeah, the core of improvisation, yes and, yes and, yes and. But like where does it come from and what it actually means and how we can utilize it in solo tabletop role-playing setting and in our lives. Improvisation method originated from a person called Keith Johnstone, who was, I think, British Canadian. He wasn't a comedian. Well, improvisation tend to be like comical. He wasn't like a comedian. He was an actor, director, writer, and teacher. And while the yes and rule is partially correct, the whole point in Keith Johnstone's method was not to just blindly say yes and into everything. The main point of that rule is to not block others and to not block overall. We tend to block ourselves as well. We tend to block narrative and we tend to block a lot of things in our lives. But what does it mean, blocking? What does it mean in this context? Contexts. That's a difficult word to say. There are at least two forms of blocking. The first one, I think, is the most easily distinguishable one, which is active blocking. Active blocking are your no's and your I don't like that, no. You know, when you're actively opposing someone's or something's intention or idea. We have a clear narrative direction and somebody gives an opposing force to that direction. That is active blocking. Then there we get the idea of yes and, that you don't say no, you always say yes to all the ideas. And then it just keeps going when you say yes, 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 and you're like building this block tower of yes ands, and you add extra stuff in it, which is nice and all, but then we get into the second form of blocking, which is passive blocking. And passive blocking is something that I think we all deal in our everyday lives a lot. That's like the thing that we all tend to do quite a lot, and it's unpleasant, but it's just a reality. Passive blocking it is quite hard to explain exactly, but it's basically when we are not directly opposing someone's idea, but we are enforcing our own idea on top of the other's idea. So we are basically like forcefully redirecting the original idea. We don't actually listen and commit to the other person's idea, which would be the saying yes, and you will keep building into the direction that has been set, but you say like, oh yeah, that's nice, but I have this idea. Basically, yeah, but is basically like passive blocking. I think but is really good. It's not only but like but it's not only but definitely it's one of those aspects. But it's basically, yeah, that's good idea, I have better idea, let's go this direction. And it's the idea of trying to be clever, trying to give more interesting spin. It's not like it is not accepting the situation as it is, but trying to add artificially something extra into the situation. And that is how it's related to solo tabletop role playing. When we are in a scene or in a dungeon or a different situation, we usually tend to like add additional spins into the narrative because we might feel that the idea is not clever enough, and we might even block our own ideas. Like we could have like the first thing that comes to our mind, we see that like a trail of blood and we are like, oh, there must be another adventure deeper in this dungeon. But then we are, no, that's boring. It must be something else. Let me roll like 5 tables to see what it actually is. Like we feel like our story that we are creating in that moment is boring, and we need to artificially give more additional spins and levels to the story. But what this can create is that when we are creating this kind of extra layers out of thin air, the story becomes really quickly oversaturated, and it's really hard for us to follow the narrative anymore, or it's really hard to follow the adventure. Like, then we have all these weird things that do not like connect to each other, and then we are in that situation like, yeah, I had this story, but now I have like these 5 different threads and they are not connecting to each other at all. And that is probably the reason that we have like rolled so many weird tables, and we have not committed to one thing going forward. So the second guideline is keep it simple, stupid. It's just staying humble and not blocking yourself and not blocking your ideas and not blocking the adventure. Just accepting the most simple, clear explanation, like there are footprints on the ground. Okay, somebody is here. And then we know we are deep in the forest, and we had a mission from the town to hunt a bear. So now we would be like, should I roll? Like, is this the bear? Is this the bear that I was sent to hunt? This feels like too simple. It can be something else. Like, no, you were tasked to hunt a bear, and you go into the forest, and there's a cave, and there are tracks on the ground. Of course they are the bear's tracks. Keep it simple, stupid. I promise you, you will get your interesting twists at some point when you just stay humble and keep building those simple small blocks. You will get a high tower eventually, and the tower is a lot more stable than something that you have built out of like this long, really uneven shaped blocks. Know when to roll. If you have the context, do not roll. Keep it simple. Grasp on the first idea you get. That is enough, and commit to that. And now finally we can get into our last guideline. How much freedom do you want into your solo tabletop adventure? And before you answer that question, change the word freedom to responsibility, and then you will get more accurate answer. So we have been talking about all these different ways how you can create more context to your story, and like how rolling the dice will eventually like build up the story for you. Starting out of nothing, it can be really hard, it can be really tasking, and it can be really time consuming to start the adventure, because you have to roll all the tables, you have to roll all the locations to have the first base idea of where you are. So it is not a crime, and actually I would advise you, when you start an adventure with a new character, build a decent background for your character. Know where your character is coming from and know where they are going. I will always create an end goal to my solo characters. Always. If they don't have any reason to be in the narrative, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen in the story if they don't have like a clear goal what they should be doing. They have no reason to go anywhere. They just exist. So I have created myself this Breath of the Wild rule. That is not a real thing. I think how Breath of the Wild begins is a perfect example of how to create this kind of perfect open world narrative. We have a basic idea who Link is, even though like most of Link's memories have been erased, but we have an idea that we are the destined hero. Like, we know who we are. We know who our closest allies are. Helicopters. Helicopters. Damn you, helicopters! So we have a vague idea of who we are. We have a vague idea of who our closest allies are. We know who our enemy is. We know who is the opposing force in our journey. And we know our end goal, what we need to do in order for us to fulfill our destiny. But fulfill the story, basically. So every time in the story when we are hitting a plateau and we are like, what next? What happens next? We always know, no matter how lost we would be within the story, we know the goal. We know where we should aim at least. And I think that's important. And so many times when I have scouring to different people's like experiences and questions about solo role playing, it's always like, I feel lost. I don't feel like this isn't like going anywhere. Like I have tried to explore all these locations, but my character like feels empty, and that's because they have nothing. They have no goal. You can still have like this open world adventure, like in Breath of the Wild, and explore every nook and cranny of a continent. But why you're doing it, that's the important part. The why. And those three are the most important guidelines in my mind for solo tabletop role-playing. Look out for empty roles. If you have enough context, if you feel like not all the outcomes are interesting, or if you feel like this role can be undermined within the scene, do not roll. Just make the decisions on your own. Second, commit to the scene, commit to the decisions, and pick the most obvious answer. Like 95% of the time, pick the most obvious answer. The story will get interesting, I promise to you. Stories are never interesting if you try to make them interesting. And number 3, know where your character should go. It is okay to determine the end goal. It's not cheating, it's not like... It is still an open world adventure. There you go, 3 guidelines that can help you be a better person. No. But I think these are actually guidelines that are really, really nice to remember in life as well. Like if you're trying to be interested in people rather than trying to be interesting in front of people, you will get a lot more out of everyone's and yourselves time as well. I will also leave you a link to Keith Johnstone's book. I highly recommend it. It's not necessarily a solo tabletop role-playing book, but it's a really good book about improvisation, and Keith really gets into like, it's really philosophical book. He really gets into nitty-gritty of what is blocking and what is acceptance. It's really good book. You really should read it. Even if you don't read books. I don't. Maybe I should give you one bonus. This is one bonus guideline. Look for endings. And I mean this. Like, create endings to your characters. This will give you longevity into your role playing, and you won't get burnt out because our brains work in a way that we are looking to find endings to things. We are looking for finalizing things because then we can let go of those ideas when they are finished in our minds. Because all the open ideas are still things that we deep within ourselves feel like we need to keep working on. So if you have just one grand open world quest that just keeps going and going and going, so you can easily after 2 months feel like you will get burned out of your solo tabletop campaign. So I give you a challenge. Try to create adventures that last for 10 sessions and then create an ending. And it doesn't have to be like ending that, oh, this character lived happily ever after. It can be just the ending of that adventure. And you can start a new adventure with the same character from the moment that you left the first adventure. But create endings. That will make it so much easier for you to pace out your adventures, and you feel like there is so much more to explore, and you will get a different kind of continuity to your adventures, and it opens up a lot of headspace for you to maybe think about the adventure from a different angle. But yeah, that was my tabletop thoughts. Tabletop tub. That's gonna be the name of the series. Tabletop thoughts. Yeah, that rhymes. That's rhymed perfectly. If you enjoyed this content, I'm probably gonna make more, so look out for it. You know what to do. You know where to find me. And you find me forever. That was code for subscribing to the channel. If you, I know you got it. Okay, it's fine. Thank you for being here, and hopefully you'll find me again really soon. For now, moro moro. That means bye in Finnish. So, wakko. Bye bye. See you soon. Drive safe. Okay. Now I will get out of this tub because my ass is killing me.